Welcome to Properties, the podcast that cuts the property industry to the bone. We answer your questions with our expert guests and call out all the bullshit that makes the industry only slightly more popular than British politics. We are your hosts, Matt Smith.
And I'm Kris Erickson.
And we are your Properteasers.
So here we are with a very special guest joining us, none other than Rupert Collingwood, a highly opinionated, energetic, and very successful serial entrepreneur who's also a great friend of both Matt and myself. Rupert is also the current CEO of London Broker.
Founder chairman,
who Matt and I are both affiliated to. Hi, Rupert.
Hello. Lovely to be here.
Hi, Rupert. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Pleasure to be here.
Well, today, Rupert, we're going to invite you to talk about as much as you would like to. We know you like to talk. We're going to interrupt you as much as we possibly can to keep things fresh. But Rupert, why don't you, start by telling us why you started the London Broker?
Sure. So I'd sold my majority in the London Management Company, which had been my first venture out on my own, and I had taken some time out. And when I came back to London, I sort of thought, what am I going to do? I started doing I went back to what I knew, which was a bit of search agency, and then started sort of, pounding the streets again and discovering that all of my contacts had left. And so they were all going, and if they hadn't left, they were thinking of leaving. And then all those conversations about, what a buying agent, that's interesting. What does that do? How does that work? And I thought, well, hang on a second. If everyone's going to start leaving big agency, we can't do that again in central London. I'd been a buying agent in 2007-8 when, the number of buying agents in central London sort of overnight went from 35 to 435.
Yeah. And
it's not good for the market. It doesn't do anybody any favors.
And they weren't really buying agents.
No, they weren't. A lot of them were runners.
Yeah.
And because if you shove 400 people into that market space, there's only so many clients that you can look after, and they're running around. So all the prices were coming, all the values were coming down, and the quality of the service, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, and I thought, well, we don't need to have a whole load of, what were people calling them, sort of private offices and property consultancies and, whatever made up name they wanted to come up with. And, essentially all offering the same service. The service was, I've got a client base, they need assistance with property, I'll help them and I'll take a fee for doing that job. Reasonable thing to do. But around the rest of the world, that's called being a broker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, why are these people not doing it? And a lot of it relates to the barrier to entry, which for the most part is cost, frankly. It's an extraordinarily expensive business to do, even without an office. And of course, in 2016, 17, when I started to think about all this, the requirement for an office had become redundant for some years. Yeah. I mean, I remember talking to somebody who I won't mention their name, but I said, who pops into your office? Very well-known office on the King's Road. And they said, drunks, foreigners looking for directions, and tradesmen asking for keys.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean,
directions.
And these things are they're 150 grand a year. Some of these things, like minimum.
We had somebody come into the office in Battersea and sat down on an armchair in the reception room and promptly urinated on the seat.
Well,
that really is the pinnacle.
Did you sell them a flat though, Matt? That's the you obviously need somewhere to relieve yourself. I've got a lovely 2-bed in the building above. But no, I mean, so I thought, okay, let's try and and emulate as an American style model for the UK, but from a UK perspective. Because what had happened previously was there'd been, broker models is not really the right description for what had come previously. They were American brands that had come into the UK to try and become estate agents in a slightly different way, but they weren't brokers.
Right.
Keller had tried, I think, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Remax to be fair, had been in the industry, had been in the country forever. Century 21 had been in there for a long time, but it was a different setup and never really got the traction that perhaps it should have done. And that's where timing really comes into this. And the only reason that I felt that the time was right for a broker style model was because good people were leaving really safe seats in really big companies.
Exactly. And so what is a broker? Tell us.
So in common vernacular, I would say a broker for the most part is an estate agent. But that's actually not really what broker means in insurance or in commercial or in shipping or anything else. What a broker does is the broker finds and creates a deal between two parties, maybe three parties, maybe four parties, but they're the glue, or then not only are they the glue, they are also the means for which all of those parties come together. They sniff out the deal. They've got a supplier, or they've got a buyer, or they've got whatever it is, and they pull a deal together out of sometimes thin air, and make a fee out of the middle of it. And that's very common in insurance, which is actually where I started my career. But it for some reason in this country, in real estate, we never copied the rest of the world. I mean, actually, when you look at the uses of the term broker, it's basically the whole of the rest of the world. The only place that uses a estate agent is England. I mean, there are other places, but for the most part, right? And it's extraordinary that that's carried on. And then because we're all obsessed about calling each other estate agents, then we had to create buying agents. And so, what do you do? Well, I'm a buying agent. Okay, great. I need you to help me sell my house because you bought it for me 4 years ago. Terribly sorry. I only buy, but I do know somebody who can do it for me. And then they'll go and take a little fee for an introduction.
Right.
It was nonsense.
Absolutely.
Why would you bother doing? Why create that barrier to engage with clients who love and trust you?
Definitely.
Any idea as to why the UK agency sort of, the marketplace has that in place in terms of, because I was thinking in America, a broker can do anything, as you just mentioned, right? Anything to broker out a transaction, right? Be it a buyer, a seller, whatever it is. Rental, sales, the same is true, certainly, for Sweden. Spain is the same as well. But here in the UK, we're so specific to what you can do. Even in offices, you can only sell in South Ken.
It might not have always been that way, because it might have been, it may be something that started sort of from the 80s onwards, because I think there were much smaller gentlemen's profession, I think, before that, where perhaps you owned the agency. So you were an estate agent as we understand it, but it was your own business. Whereas I think it expanded into what we now understand is a whole bunch of people employed who hit the phones all day long and then go out and do viewings between X time and then have to call their clients between this time and that time, which I think that was quite new. I mean, I don't think it's always been that way.
I've never really looked into it, frankly, but I do believe that buying and owning homes or land at least on scale is a relatively new phenonon. And I'm not talking about, last week. In terms of hundreds of years. Most people rented. Probably up until I'm guessing here, sort of emancipation after the Second World War. When the garden cities were built and they had to sell them, and people aspired, and then eventually you got that boom. Thatcherism, all of that sort of stuff. I imagine there's something related to that.
I agree.
But I think that the notion has always been, I think in America and maybe other countries around the world, my guess would be that there has been this acute understanding that the buyer also needs some representation within the transaction. And I don't think that's been particularly commonplace. I would say in this country it still isn't commonplace, actually.
It definitely is.
But it is getting more common.
It is.
For sure.
But I would say a lot of people wouldn't actually know what a buying agent is.
No.
I mean, sometimes you'd actually have to explain. And I completely agree. And I think it's crazy because it's so much better for a selling broker to actually negotiate with a buying broker, because it's
Absolutely
just
right.
so much better. Everyone, especially the clients, the sellers and the buyers, feel looked after.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they don't feel like someone's trying to pull the wool over their eyes because they've got representation themselves.
Absolutely right. And I think the other, and you know, the same can be said for lawyers, of course. And that's always been one of those things that's always been a bit of a rub for me, is like, you know, right, you've found this beautiful house, which is your absolute dream, and which you're probably going, for most people, going to invest a significant percentage of your net worth into. Who do you want to make sure that everything is kosher for you? Oh, I think I'll find the cheapest person possible.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to go and use a conveyancing conveyor belt business, and, you know, because I'm going to save, you know, 1,500 quid.
Yeah, isn't it bizarre?
Insane.
Yeah,
Baffles me.
I would say this is not the place
Why
you
would
want
you
to save
do that?
money. Yeah,
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And you know, so okay, if you were going to buy a business for £5 million, are you telling me that you wouldn't go and use a top commercial law firm for that?
Especially since it's so complicated to buy property in England. I mean, you know, that's where you want to be spending the cash.
Yeah, definitely.
And the same could be said for agents.
Well, exactly. I was going to say that goes back to mentality, right? Because it's so unique to this country. I mean, you start off emails when you agree a transaction by saying, this is not the place to cut costs. Yeah. Here's 4 or 5 good solicitors, right? And they vary in prices, right? But it happens every single time.
It does.
I mean, for the sake of £5,000 when you're spending £2.5 million on a purchase.
Yeah. But you know, it's in those very tight margins where the difference is made, right? And there's a huge amount of psychology. There's probably thousands of books written by far brainier people than us lot, talking about the theories and the psychology of price and value.
100%. Although you always get what you pay for, and people love to, I think estate agents and solicitors or lawyers are probably pretty equal in what people think about them, and that they absolutely hate us. But if you're paying somebody a really lousy fee, you're probably going to get a really lousy service. Yeah. Which I think maybe that's also something that I know is one of your favorite topics, Rupert. Why don't you talk to us about what you think about fees?
That's a red rag for a bull. I mean, look, the fees issue in the UK is, you can get quite insular when you think about it and you're just thinking about it in the UK. So I think probably the best place to start is by looking at it from a global perspective, right? I think at the top end, we're really looking at America, which is pretty much 6%. There is some variation, but usually it's 6%. Now, that does get split when it comes to collaborating with other brokers, which is...
As it does here, on very, very much lower fees.
Yes, it does, but not in the same way.
Not in the same way.
It is absolutely prescribed as a sort of 3% to the buy side, 3% to the sell side. And that's how their market is set up.
Yeah.
But a broker could act for the buyer and seller.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So they could pocket 6%.
Fine. I mean, but not many people know this. That's the same for an estate agent in this country. You just have to declare that fact to your clients. There's no problem with it. You just have to declare it. It's the same with referral fees before anyone writes in, and all of those sorts of bits and pieces. You've got to be transparent.
Yeah.
But when you then, France 5%. I think Australia 3%,
South Africa between 5 and 7.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about significant numbers, right? And the age-old argument always comes back. Oh, well, it's not the same because look at the prices in London. Well, yeah, okay, I'll take that argument, and then go and look at fees in like Nottingham, or go and look at fees in in Newcastle. I don't know where I'm picking up. Things beginning with N, but anywhere, right? The fees go down outside London.
Yeah.
And, for lesser transactions.
Yeah. And even as you get within London, further as a radius out from central London. Yeah.
And it's because of competition. And it's because of, there are a whole load of reasons that sit behind this. And there are lots of people who would like to say, it's about regulation. It's nothing to do with regulation. And lots of people who would say, oh, but why is the estate agent being paid that much money? Well, actually, that it's not that much money. If you had any inkling as to how much running this business and doing this thing costs,
absolutely,
you'd appreciate that it isn't that much money.
Yeah.
And also, you only pay us if we're successful.
That's right.
And that's another thing that is slightly irksome around the industry. We don't tell people this stuff, right? We go about doing our jobs, and we think, because we do it every day, that other people are experts in what we do.
Yeah.
It's like coming and asking me about LIBOR, or asking me to go and, I don't know, rewire a house. I haven't the clue how to do that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't walk into your business and say, why are you charging that? It's really easy. Gosh, you're not worth that much money.
Yeah.
Sure, okay, if you don't think I'm worth that much money, then go and find somebody else.
Yeah.
But we have no respect for the trade that we're in. We have no respect for ourselves.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something in that. But there's also the fact that someone's always prepared to come and do it cheaper. So, well, I'm just as good as so-and-so, but I'll do it for 0.5% less.
As you said earlier, you get what you pay for.
Yeah.
And that is manifestly true. And it doesn't necessarily, I think there is also a difference, right? It doesn't necessarily manifest itself that you get what you pay for fact in the number received in the bank at the end of the transaction.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of different ways that you can justify value. Value is not necessarily pounds, shillings, and pence. It can be the deal went through the first time.
Yeah.
It was easy and I didn't nearly give myself a stroke having to deal with my lawyer because my agent dealt with it.
Yeah.
My agent was on my side. They took great photos.
Yeah.
They made sure that the buyers that they presented to me were ready and able to buy my home.
And people don't necessarily realize that this is all going on in the background.
No.
And I think you can't ring up a client and say, well, this is what I've done today and give them a list of things. But this is perhaps what people aren't aware of. They think we open a door and then we hand it over to the solicitor and that's the end of it.
But the reason that has come about is because that's what we've allowed the perception to become. And sometimes that is true. That is what's happening in a number of firms.
Right.
And
that's, I think, the key difference between what is a broker and what is an estate agent.
I think that's a very good point, and I think that's well made, for sure. And I think a broker understands that because they are receiving the commission. And they're not receiving basic salaries, or most aren't. Certainly they shouldn't be, in my opinion.
Right.
The work that they do and the energy and effort that they put in translates to money that puts food on the table and a roof over their heads. And whether they make a sale or not genuinely impacts their lives.
Absolutely. And I think that's a huge selling point for a client. You
Absolutely.
are very, very invested.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not getting a salary whether I sell your house or not.
Yeah.
I've got to do that. But it doesn't take away the point that, if you look just from you zoom out and let's look across, as a general rule, across large corporate, big sort of branded agencies. This isn't a huge, I'm doing my best. Of course, there are exceptions to all of this. But there is, in the old days, you walked into an estate agent's office, certainly you walked into where we all worked at Foxtons, and you open the door and you could be blown out of the door by all the braying and shouting and negotiating that was going on, right? 100%. And all banter, right? Fun, whatever. It was a lot of fun. You walk in there today and they're silent, these places. Everyone's tiddly-tapping away on their keyboards.
Yeah.
Firing off an email thinking that the job is done. It really isn't. But because we've enabled that, and then we've handed over control to the portals, I mean, literally, it is beyond my comprehension why we do it. We're just as guilty of it as the others, but it's a habit that we need to break because people don't walk into estate agents. Right?
No, they don't.
They sit on an iPad in bed and
Yeah.
send you emails at 11 o'clock at night saying, "Don't call me in the morning."
Yeah.
You know,
Or
I'm going to be busy.
Don't call me at all.
Don't call me at all.
You know?
I mean, what? Sorry, I've got to do my job.
Yeah.
I'm selling this house. Okay, don't want me to call you.
You have to beg to have a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, they'll want to meet you at a property without you being able to speak to them at all.
Yeah.
And, then
And qualify them in any way, shape, or
It's on the second floor. I didn't realize. Well, if we'd managed to have a conversation, we could have talked about what you really need, and I would have told you, don't waste your time.
So, I mean, that raises a very interesting question, doesn't it?
Mm.
It raises a really interesting question. Should estate agents actually not base their entire models on how many viewings they do? Should they be measured on success on the basis of how many viewings they've done? Because surely the best estate agent, the one that you want to pay, is the one who does one viewing and sells it.
Absolutely.
Right? That's the better estate agent than the one that goes, yeah, we've sent 40 people through your door.
Yeah.
20 of which have had to rearrange after you've cleaned up the house for the umpteenth time, but and it's a bit expensive. The feedback that we're getting is it's a bit expensive. We've got to drop the price. That's the model, right? Bring it on, do loads of viewings, tell the client that it's too much money, get the house, get the price down until a point where the buyer comes up, vendor comes down, you get a deal. That was the model.
And it was a model that was based on a time where properties were much cheaper. Stamp duty was much cheaper. There was a frenzy every time a property came onto the market that you'd be queuing up to get in the door. There'd be 20 offers on it the next day.
Yeah.
And that's the only way it works.
And you could qualify the buyer because they had to call you.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah.
Right? But even so, you were able to hire people who didn't need to do anything because people would turn up for a property and you'd probably get a load of offers. I mean, we all worked in those markets, and it was just money for old rope. Yeah. But the reality is that's not how things work anymore. It's far more expensive to buy property, and you need to understand and you need to have communication. Otherwise, everybody's wasting their time and there is absolutely no synergy.
But I mean, slightly as a message to people who maybe buyers who might happen across this podcast, estate agents really love dealing with nice people. We're more likely to ring the person that is nice and friendly and enjoys a chat and wants to learn and wants to find the house. That's the person we're going to call first.
Yeah.
When the perfect property comes on.
Yeah.
We're not going to call the person that didn't turn up to the viewing or turned up to the viewing half an hour late with 2 coffees in hand, which showed absolutely no respect to you or me,
because we are professionals
who are doing the job.
As well.
Yeah. And that goes both ways as well.
Badly,
I was thinking earlier when you mentioned it, I thought about the exact same thing. I was thinking about clients that we've had that we could term as our best clients, in terms of personality wise, right?
Yeah.
And it's always the clients that are happy to take your recommendations. They let you get on with it. They sort of address you respectfully. I was thinking about the clients we had that said, you're the expert, just get on with it type of thing.
Right.
They pay good fees and you have a good relationship. And you know what? Everything is so smooth.
Absolutely.
There's no issues.
And then they tell their friends.
And then they tell
and then they well, you must use these guys because it was such a tremendous experience.
Yeah.
And coming back to the to come back to the point about fees, anybody can justify the fee low or high, right? You've got to have the confidence to be able to say no.
Yeah.
You've got to have the confidence in your own abilities to say, look, I'm really sorry, I'm worth more money than that.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to do it for you.
And isn't that the sort of person you want negotiating on your behalf rather than the person that says, oh, all right then, yes, I'll do it.
But also frames their fee as a question. How much is your fee? 1.5%? I mean, it's like,
True.
It's 2.5%.
Yeah.
And you're really lucky to have me, doing that. I may need to cut this out, but there's a wonderful story that so not many people know this about me, but actually I started off as a classical singer. I was a choral scholar at Canterbury Cathedral, and then went on and did a lot of other bits and pieces, a bit of opera and stuff. But there was this wonderful singer who I won't mention their name, but very famous soprano, and they always say, well, why do you never get nervous? And she said, because when I look out to the audience or the congregation in front of me, I don't think, oh my God, they're going to judge me. She sits there and thinks, you lucky, lucky people. You've come here to hear me sing. And that's how it works.
Yeah.
You know, how fortunate you are to have found us, because we're going to make what is, I think, the second most stressful experience of life after divorce, you know, an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
And that's the experience that we've got to try and build for people. And guess what? You don't need to pay us that much money.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
You know, compare us to your home country and you'll and it's an absolute fucking bargain.
Absolutely.
So, you know.
And you generally are able to offer a much, much better service. The whole experience for them is going to be, you know, a world-class service, not something that you want to, you know, be pulling your hair out and thinking, God, I hate estate agents.
But that's why I love dealing with Americans for that very reason, because they have this sort of sales mentality built into their DNA, right? They
like being sold
They
too.
like being sold too. And as a salesperson, effectively, I mean, that's the holy grail, right?
Yeah.
And you then provide them with a service that perhaps is far better than you thought you were going to do, because they're allowing you, they're giving you the sort of opportunity to do it. Whilst here in the UK, and it's not just the UK, there are plenty of other countries, particularly on the continent, people don't like to be sold to. And I think that's also another big issue. You can hear it on a pitch. So they don't ask any leading questions. It's just tell me and then get out.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to win anything on that. How do you build up a rapport with anyone? I was going to go back to fees very quickly. And you've just come back from Los Angeles. And in terms of fees in America, we're sort of saying that in and out, buying and selling, they're around 6%. Do the agents there negotiate on their fees? Is that how they beat other competitors? Or how do they sort of get value?
So there is, look, I'm not an expert on this, but there's a bit of knowledge that I have. As I understand it, a lot of there is a little bbit of wiggle room on fees. So it might not be 6, it might be 5.5, maybe it'll be 5, but it's not 3, right? It's not 1.5.
Or 0.75.
Or 0.75.
Split
or
4 ways.
0.7 in Fulham for a £5 million house.
Shocking.
I mean, you know,
Yeah.
shocking. Anyway, what it is it's about relationships over there first and foremost. So in the way that somebody always says, "Oh, well, I already know a mortgage broker over here," right?
Yeah.
It's slightly that over there. So they win business on the back of relationships and success, and you know, and because they can make money off both sides, you get those who are super good at listing, and you get those who represent the buyers and deal with the inquiries that come in via the MLS or whatever it is, and then they learn their trade and they progress up the scale. But in terms, I think it's all about character and personality and who you know.
Yeah.
And who you know is like super important, right?
Well, it is.
In any sales
life.
role,
Right.
but in life.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it's not a sort of old boys network version of who you know. It's like, this is the way the world works.
Yeah.
You know, people like people who they know and like and trust and
I think
build a rapport with.
We're all sitting here as part of the London broker, and a lot of the business that we all get is through word of mouth, through intros, you know, so we can totally understand that. And I think when you go and pitch for business, when you've been introduced to somebody from somebody that they know, you've got a much better chance of getting that instruction.
And it's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
When you're sitting in the room where somebody's recommended you into them, it's a completely different conversation that you had. Just to come back on that point though, and because it does raise an interesting point that maybe we'll get onto later, but it loops it in nicely. To an extent, the regulatory bodies within the different states also do their best to control fees.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So they are the narrative over there is to protect the value that these guys and girls are providing and how they make their money. But again, a lot of it is eat what you kill. It is brokerage. It is self-employed.
Yeah.
And therefore they deserve, you know, it's, you know, as with anything, the more risk you put in, the higher the return should be, right? If you're getting 150 grand salary, you should probably be on maybe 10%, not even, right? If you're getting nothing, you should take a massive whack of that commission. Yeah. And when we then look at that over in the UK, and this is a critical point for me, when the valuer in the office is going out for a pitch and he's got, or she's got, let's say 5 minimum, negs in the office, what does it say about the quality of your negs when you come back and go, hey guys, new instruction, it's 1%?
Yeah.
All these poor, young people on cockle salaries, on really low salaries.
Yeah.
And then they come back in and it's a great deal. Yeah, let's do a call out, guys, on this thing. And you're gonna get whatever it is, 10% of the 1% that I've got you.
And that comes down
That's
to the
terrible,
model you
isn't
were
it?
talking
It's
about
awful.
earlier, where you've got just a valuer who's targeted on how many instructions,
Absolutely.
you put in, rather than who's got the highest fee. Although I suppose some people get targeted on your average fee within an office, but they're more targeted on, did you come back with that instruction or not?
But so did you come back? What are the targets? You will know better than me because it's been a long time since I've been agency. But I remember it being, how many instructions have you won?
Mhm.
Yeah.
How many phone calls have you made?
Yeah.
How many viewings have you done?
Yeah.
Not how many properties have you sold?
Absolutely.
Because the theory is throw enough mud at the wall and and it will work.
And it comes down to who you're hiring. You have to trust, if you're going to hire somebody who's going to go out and make one phone call, do one viewing and do one sale, that's because you've hired somebody who knows what they're doing and you can trust them to do the job, as opposed to let's just hire people who we don't know if they're any good and we'll monitor them in that way. So we make sure that they are tied to the phone or, going and showing properties so that we can tell the client, well, we've done 40 viewings, we'll better bring the price down because you got the price wrong in the first place because you sent somebody out who didn't know what they were doing.
Absolutely right. And that leads on to another point, of course, nicely, is that when that person, how many times have we been in the situation where you do one viewing and then you sell it? And what does the vendor do? The vendor doesn't say, oh my God, you guys are the best team. I could not have had a better result. You got me over asking price before it went to the market with I'm going to pay you less money.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. You haven't.
What?
Yeah.
You're not paying me for the amount of work and phone calls I did to get your house sold.
Yeah.
You're paying me for the 20 years that I put in prior to that to achieve that result for you.
Right. Yeah.
And
That's what you wanted.
And again, we are guilty of all of this. It is our fault that we've enabled this to happen. The conversations and the dialogue is wrong. The dialogue should be, as I said, you're really lucky to have me here, right? This is why we're of value to you. And we are the people that you should choose.
Yeah.
And look, the reason that you're picking me or whoever it is, for whatever reason, everyone will have a different pitch, but the reason you're picking me is because of those reasons and my experience in offering you this service.
Yeah.
And the fee that you pay me, you'll be glad to pay me by fee by the end of it.
Right.
Not resentful of it.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of this comes from. Because we don't set up in the first instance, the conversation, not only today, but like historically, is based on the achievement of that money hitting their account and nothing else in the middle. A Ford will get me from A to B just as well as a Ferrari, but Ferrari aren't sitting there having to justify their fee to the buyer.
Yeah.
You're buying a Ferrari, mate. Lucky you.
Yeah.
Well done for having the money to buy a Ferrari.
Because you drive a Ferrari so you can experience it, whereas you're handing everything over to the brokers so you don't actually know what they're doing.
Exactly.
But I think historically people have put their faith in the brand. So they think, oh, well, it's X brand. They know what they're doing, when it's actually the individual that you're dealing with, but they're paying the brand. And in theory, they think, well, I'm getting a much better deal because I'm paying this fantastic brand, but I'm only paying 1%. So for them as a consumer, they think they're getting a great deal, when in actual fact, you're not really. You're paying a low fee and you're still getting an individual who is prepared to work at that low fee.
And I mean, it's a pertinent conversation for today, because the more the broker model becomes prevalent in the UK, the more that conversation changes, because there are a lot of people who are now seeing what we did. I'm absolutely forthright about the fact that we were the first.
Yeah.
We're the people that called ourselves brokers and successfully did that.
Yeah.
And the more people that come out and do it, the more attractive it seems to others. But I do think it's important for other professionals looking at this, or other business owners who are thinking, I'm going to swap over to a sort of broker style model, is there is a real difference between a broker model where you have competent individuals doing a job on a basis of a self-employed, as it were, style, and a cheap way of running an estate agency. And not everybody who comes from a renowned seat at a big firm transitions effectively into being a broker.
Yeah.
There is a lot of lifting.
Yeah.
That the brands do,
yeah,
right? And some people are really, really good at being a neg in a big brand.
Yeah.
Brilliant at it.
Yeah.
And they don't always transition particularly well to being a self-employed self-starter who has to lift themselves up by their bootstraps every morning, come rain or shine, and make that deal happen.
Yeah.
It's a different breed.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you've spent your whole career in quite a regimented role. Yeah. To go to being a jack of all trades and having to do every single part of it.
Of the process.
Yeah. It's which personally we love, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
We love the diversity of it.
And I mean, also
it can be very difficult change. And I think a lot of people that we know have found it quite difficult.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And as a self-employed broker, you're also self-employed, so you're running your own business at the same time, which is a whole new thing for most people.
Well, that brings us neatly to where we started in terms of why you started the London Broker. What do you think are the challenges if we look at as you just mentioned, not everybody can come in and do it, and there's different ways of being a broker. Do you think that there's a future for traditional estate agency to disappear altogether?
Listen, I don't think that's a realistic prospect. I think there is always a place for all of these different models to coexist very happily alongside each other. I'm not going to do a sort of purple bricks moment and tell everybody that we're going to occupy 100% of market space.
Yeah, we've just seen how that.
That's not what the model's about. I created the London Broker. You guys know me well enough. I'm quite altruistic, right? I don't do it for the money, particularly. Of course, we need to make some money. We need to try and be at least half profitable. But I do it because I want to enable really good people to offer really good service to their client base.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that the model that we currently had in 2016, and is, we're seeing how that goes now, a estate agency model really was working in the best interests of everybody in the country. We had Purple Bricks, and we had Strike, and we've got Yopa, and we've got Knight Frank, and we've got Savills and CBRE and all that. There's a happy mix, there is no one size fits all answer to any market.
No, true.
And so I think young people in particular have got to learn how to do the job somewhere. They're not going to learn that by being a broker.
No, you can't.
And one of the things that I'm quite passionate about, and people will probably know what I'm talking about when I say this, is I think that morally it is reprehensible to take young people and sell them a dream of being able to become a real estate broker because they've watched some Netflix show or something like that, right?
Type of...
And then hand them a book and charge them a monthly fee and then put them into somebody else's main asset and tell the barefaced lie that they're the best person to do that job. Now, everybody should have a go. Everybody should have a chance to make money. I have no problem with that. But I think you have to think about the consequences of your actions for people that are engaging with you as me as an individual or you as a brand.
Absolutely.
And I think that, that's why I think we have to be very careful about pushing the broker model as the model for everybody, because it isn't for everybody.
But the London broker is quite unique, though, because you have sort of a requirement to be invited into the partnership, if you like, or the brokership, right? That you have to have X amount of years, and you have to check out as to who you are, right? Because I thought that's actually a little bit of a risk to the broker model, is having all these 18, 19-year-olds. We have met a few of these who have never sold a property. I don't think they've even conducted a viewing, who now think they're going to go out and be a big real estate star.
Instagram
Exactly.
influencer,
and
agent.
100%. And all these shows that we've seen, you know, from $1 Million Listing, which started all off on Bravo, etc., you know, and that's been pushed on social media. This is what people think they can do. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Matt and I have been in business for 20 years, as have you, as have most of us plus, right? And it's difficult and it's challenging. And an 18-year-old kid is most likely unable to do that, right?
And you're absolutely, there are some very capable 18-year-old children, by the way.
Yeah, they are.
But you need to go and learn a trade. You have to understand something before you genuinely go and sit in front of somebody and say, listen, give me your house. I'm going to get you the best possible price. Yeah. But it comes from this belief that selling a house consists of taking photographs, doing a floor plan, doing an EPC, popping it online.
So how would you bring that round to your argument against a qualification for an agent?
So, well, I suppose that's the starting point, isn't it? The starting point is there is no barrier to entry, which is not true. There is a barrier to entry because, anybody can set up as an estate. That's not true, actually. There's so much that you have to do before you can set up as an estate agent. But let's skip over those little bits first and go to this sort of narrative that anybody can become an estate agent. Yeah, sure. You can fill out the forms, register the business, get the money laundering supervision and all that sort of stuff. But it doesn't mean you're going to be successful. So, you know, that's half the battle, right?
Yeah.
So, hello, I've arrived. Now what? You know, okay. Now you've got.
But has the lack of having to have any kind of qualification contributed to the fact that anyone can be an estate agent? There's ridiculous amounts of competition, hence the really low fees.
Yeah, but okay. So the argument that you're making is that qualifications would reduce the number of people in a estate agency and would increase fees. That's the argument that is being made. So qualifications will. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if either of you have done the sort of ALA or
ALA, yes,
sort of qualifications.
Not RICS.
But a lot of this stuff consists of multiple choice questions. I looked up one the other day. I think one of the questions was, what should you do in hot weather with a fire extinguisher? I mean, I'm sorry, but that doesn't make me a better estate agent. All right? So number one. So what is being qualified? You know,
being some understanding of the conveyancing process.
But you learn that by doing the job.
Well, that's how we all learned it.
Absolutely. No amount.
But we're going back to that.
But no amount of learning at school or learning at university. You can't go to university and become a lawyer. You then stop being at school and doing whatever the qualification is to become a lawyer, and then you become a trainee lawyer, right? Yeah. For however long, it's like 4 years or something, you know, quite serious. Same with being a doctor. You know, you do the bit on paper and then you go, it's not different to doing your driving test. You know, you do the practical, you do the theory, and then I remember my driving instructor said, when you've passed your test, it's basically what the government is saying to you is you're now able to learn on your own how to be a good driver.
Yeah.
And that's the critical bit. And what I don't want to see happening, and there are a number of reasons that I'm against it, but what I don't want to see happening is that there's nothing wrong with not being good at exams. All right? You can be shit at doing exams and still be a perfectly good, excellent, in fact, estate agent.
Yeah.
You do not need somebody who, frankly, a lot of these qualifications have been made up by people who sort of, you know, became the referees, right? You know, really good at it. And then decided to make a career change because they weren't being selected for the squad. And so they've gone off and made these qualifications to take money off people. And it won't reduce competition, and it won't reduce bad behavior, and it won't increase fees because the competition will still pass the exams, right? There are 50,000 people involved in real estate, in property in this country. it will still be 50,000 people after the exam. It's just all those 50,000 people will have paid one, maybe two companies, 500 quid to do an exam. Let me finish, because this is important. So they'll have done that. Then those 50,000 people will then all have to do compulsory continuous professional development every year for whatever cost that is. Then all of the firms, what is there, 25,000 firms or something like that, they'll all then pay an annual license to one or two firms to do it. And the net result will be absolutely fuck all change. The fees will still come down because there'll still be the same number of people in there. And if you can't pitch at the moment that the reason you should use me is because I'm the better agent, you're not going to be able to get a higher fee when everybody's got the same qualification.
Agreed. But would there be, if there was a qualification, a minimum standard that you had to meet to act as an estate agent within England, just say, for example, would the government then have more of a chance of saying we need a minimum fee? No, you think there's no chance of that? But then you were saying
you're talking about a government. You're talking about a government that has, for the last 13 years, actively created a hostile environment for landlords. Yeah, they hate us. They hate us.
Yeah.
The party of the property owning class. Have destroyed the property industry.
Well, they've certainly made a bloody mess of it.
They're doing everything they can do to ruin this country.
Yeah.
But we're going to Brexit. We're going to open up to the world. Oh, and by the way, if you're a foreigner, here's a 3% stamp duty additional charge. Or 2%, isn't it? It's 2% at the moment.
It's 2% at the moment.
They're going to make it 3%.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Yeah.
They're not interested in doing anything like that.
But if you were talking about the states earlier, or some states within America.
The regulators.
So is that not the way to get it regulated here? Otherwise, or do you think there's no chance of it happening?
I think that the motivations of the regulators aren't there. I have a little plan around this. I do. I'm not going to go into it now.
Okay.
But I do believe that is certainly something that should be looked at. But that does not involve it doesn't require a qualification to get there. It requires you to act professionally. And to act, you can't teach someone to act professionally. No. They can learn.
Yeah.
But,
there's a certain type of person, who becomes an estate agent, I think. And generally, certainly within our careers, most people are polite, well brought up, and nice people, I think. I've very rarely met any terrible, horrendous estate agents where people have this awful reputation. But I have come across a few isolated people in my own property searches with stuff that I can afford to buy, where they've been absolutely horrendous. But in our career of what we sell, people have been of a very high caliber.
But I think, but we also work in prime central London, in the best market, probably in the world, next to likes of New York and Los Angeles. So the quality of estate agents here are exceptionally high, right? But I agree with you, because when I've bought and sold 3 or 4 times, and as soon as they know I'm an estate agent, it goes from not calling me, I don't need to be called sir, but there has to be some sort of respect on the client, to mate. And they don't bother engaging me. I mean, the last purchase, I did the conveyancing on a Friday.
Yeah, they sent
that to the seller and said, here's the weekly update. But I wrote it as the buyer.
You did the whole thing.
I did the whole thing. I was like, that is just mental. How can you even take a fee for this?
But you see, I think the other point, the point that sort of raises, is the fact that there is this disparity, right, in terms of service and quality delivery, right?
Yeah.
And again, we have been quite privileged in the fact that we've been able to experience the place that we have, because I mean, the furthest south I've ever had to work is like Streatham, right?
Yeah.
We're not selling in where I live, and it's selling Kent and all. Sort of, but we do a bit of searching and stuff like that. But I think that has come about, that their quality of delivery, that quality of conversation, all the rest of it, it obviously works for them in their area, that it does work. Because, okay, you and I might not want to be called mate, but there are plenty of people who do exist where they are, who are perfectly happy with being called mate, and all the rest of that sort of thing. If they're also, the other nice thing about our industry is it is actually self-regulating. If you're shit, you don't survive very long. So you get rid of the bad eggs. Where the worry comes, and this is, and it's not really it's not really an argument for regulation, because we are already regulated. I know people like to say, oh, you're not regulated. We are regulated. There are reams of laws that apply to what we do.
Absolutely.
And if we don't do them, we can be fined and can be shut down and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
The issue is the enforcement of those laws. And there is no blame here, I would say. Trading standards have a tremendously difficult job in policing these very complicated laws that apply to 25,000 businesses, 50,000 people around the country, when trading standards have other priorities. And the local authorities who then run those trading standards teams need the money from the fines that they generate, not to improve and grow the trading standards teams, but actually to run their borough or their local authority.
Yeah.
So actually, if you want to get rid of bad eggs, if you want to improve things, enforce the current rules, enforce the law. It's already written down. And if we were able to do that, again, there's a little thing that's percolating and has been for a while around this, that would be a better way to improve standards. Because if you can you only need to give one or two examples of shutting down bad people, bad actors. In the industry, that way you will lift the standard and you'll give the confidence to other agents to do better. Because the whole thing is lifting, but it won't affect fees.
I think that's
the sad thing.
I'm not arguing for qualification by any means. Being a person who absolutely hates any kind of exams. I mean, I was never any good at exams, but and I'm all for learning on the job. But I wonder if it just wouldn't add a bit of respect to the industry, perhaps, or maybe an estate agent would appear a slightly better quality of person in the eyes of the client, perhaps. But if there was some kind of understanding of some training that they had to do before
from a multiple choice question.
Starting.
I mean,
I don't know, multiple choice, but I mean, some sort of understanding of how it works before you're let loose.
But how? I mean, look. I mean, we could go round and round in circles on this point. I just feel that the reason that people don't respect estate agents has got nothing to do whether they've got a qualification or not. It's because we don't respect ourselves. We don't sit there and justify. We've just the whole part of this. The first part of this podcast is about how we don't respect ourselves to say no when somebody says, well, I'll pay you 0.7%. No.
Too scared to lose.
It's too that. Yes, there is a lot of competition and all the rest of it, but that's not the reason for the low fees. If you can't make a profit out of the industry, then stop doing it. And leave it to someone else. But there are a lot of people who will just come and throw money at it, or they're cash flowing the survival of their business, or whatever it is, and that's fine. People must do what they want to do. But really, I think it's up to people. It's up to us, right? If we want to make a better industry. We have to make a better industry. We don't need a bill and a license, I guess, and all of that sort of stuff. We need to lead, and you need to lead from the front, right? That's what I like to hope that we as the London Broker, we as the London Broker are doing. We are trying to lead this, broker revolution in inverted commas.
And fees are very important when it comes to brokers and collaboration. So what people, I think, don't understand, or what sellers don't understand, is how often a fee can be split. And that comes down to collaborating with other brokers.
Absolutely.
And as there are more and more brokers, there will be more collaboration. And it's essential that there's enough fees to go around. What are your thoughts on collaboration?
I think it is an essential part of our industry moving forward. And the reason that it's going to be so critical is because with the evolution of the broker model, you have a whole load of people, good and bad, who are financially autonomous. So for the first time, they don't need to call up the chain of command and say, I want to take this buyer who's rung me and I've built a good rapport with. I want to go and show them somebody else's stock. Oh, yeah, great. And how much are they going to pay you? Well, I'm going to get a split of 0.2%. Why are you doing that? Go and sell the thing that we're getting 2% on. If you're lucky. 1%, 0.7. So, that is, so now when you remove that and the broker is taking a lion's share of the fee, that broker, who tends to be a little bit longer in the tooth, they've done it, they appreciate a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, right? Oh, I've got interest on, you know when interest is bullshit or not.
Yeah.
You don't have to justify it to your line manager, right? It's easy. Those people will be able to say, I would rather have $5,000 today than 10 grand tomorrow. Yeah. And think about that from what we've just been talking about, the respect that agents could have, right? I've split my fee to get your house sold. I'm still going to be involved. I'm getting paid half of what I was getting paid before.
Yeah.
But brilliant. You've got to win.
Yeah.
Now, the theory against that is, well, because everything's listed on Rightmove, those people should be able to find that house themselves, which is a perfectly legitimate point.
Yeah.
But let's think of the experience, the customer experience on the other side. That buyer has then got a rapport with this person. He's become a client of theirs in one way, shape or another. And they've got an excellent experience where they're going, well, I didn't have to call. I mean, the fracturing of the market now. I mean, there used to be sort of like 5 estate agents. Now there are 505 estate agents in South Kensington alone. I'm making that number up. But, probably true though, actually.
Yeah.
But they are not having to make those phone calls. So they are taken through the door of a property that's absolutely right for them because somebody's listened to what they had to say.
Right.
They've found it for them. They've taken time out of their day to find it for them. And they're going to get the deal done quicker.
And
what a wonderful experience to have, right?
Absolutely. And it comes down to also that brokers will then be able to negotiate with each other, which means it's always going to be a smoother transaction.
I was going to say, it's funny because we spoke to someone recently who didn't inquire through the traditional portals, Rightmove and Zoopla, right? And we asked the question, how come you didn't see this property on, it's all on big portals? And they said, I'm not on those portals. It's a headache, and what this particular lady meant was that she inquires on Rightmove, gets one agent registering her, and then gets called by the entire company, to buy this, sell this, whatever the case is, and it's too much. And she just sort of gives up, right? And with brokers collaborating, it should fall into a natural sort of sequence where buyers are represented by a broker, the sellers obviously are represented by a broker, and then it's up to them to find a transaction.
Right. And the brokers can go and look through the portals.
Exactly, and then
because they don't mind getting the phone call.
There you go. So the collaboration has to be key, and then
that's why
things
nobody
like
picks up their phone because you go onto any site to buy something where you're stupid enough to put in your phone number, and you'll be called every 5 minutes for the rest of your life.
And because our systems are so dreadful, because nobody puts any data on the systems, and the systems also don't work on the basis of they don't work on the basis of humanity, right? It's not like what do you put into a system? Postcode, price, number of bedrooms, right? Outside space, parking, but that's it. Whereas in reality, the decision-making process is a little bit more complicated than that.
Yeah.
Here, I've got a 2-bedroom flat in SW6 that's perfect for you. Okay, great, because it's a 2-bedroom flat in SW6. Right, there are so many emotional triggers and little buying signs that we will pick up from meeting someone. But you can't put that into a system. But the systems, because they were built in an era of throwing shit at the wall. Yeah. That's when those systems were built.
Absolutely.
And so what we do on email is throw shit at the wall.
Yeah.
In the hope that we'll go, oh, actually, that's ideal for me.
Yeah.
You can imagine from a buyer's perspective then, because they, I was going to say, every single buyer that you end up dealing with, they end up almost buying something completely different to what they first inquired about, right? I mean, we see it all the time, right?
All the time.
You can imagine if you're a buyer then in terms of your experience, and you have to explain that story, go through that sort of that sequence with 3 or 4 different agents. I mean, I top myself personally.
But it's not just 3 or 4 different agents. That is the real problem. There are loads of us, and we're all picking up lots of different stock from lots of different places. Sometimes it's on market, sometimes it's off market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It is so difficult for any one buyer to have a single point of contact. But that's why the broker model will continue to grow and will continue to succeed, because that individual broker is not now ringing through a list of 500 buyers that they've got on a screen, or in the old days on a Rolodex. They're looking after sort of 5 people.
Yeah.
And those 5 people should convert. They might not convert tomorrow, but they will convert in time.
Yeah.
And they know everything about those 5
And they
people.
know everything about those 5 people. And,
Yeah.
and what a completely different experience. And
That's it.
and that's why you pay the fee.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why you pay the fee.
And that's the real difference between a broker and an agent.
It is.
That is really what you're paying for, and the quality of the understanding of what you want and the way that is then implemented.
Absolutely.
And all of the groundwork and the legwork that's taken out.
They care. They care.
Well, in America, everyone's got, they have a lawyer on speed dial.
Yeah.
They all have their accountants, because everyone has to file their own taxes, right? And they also have a broker.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the Americans are supposed to say, well, let me talk to my broker.
Yeah.
Insurance broker? No, property guy, right?
Yeah,
so when we start hearing those terms battered around London, we're making headway, right?
And we are, it's lovely to see the term broker, which we brought in. I brought in.
We're gonna put some applause here.
Becoming common vernacular, right? That is a
definitely.
tremendous step forward.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled by that.
Yeah.
Even if that's the only thing that I leave behind. But the just coming back to one of your points that you were talking about, getting this collaboration. And I think that one of the other challenges that we have around collaboration in the broker world is trust between brokers. In our business, as you said a while ago, you've got to have a certain amount of experience and you've got to pass a sniff test, right? And that's how we've done it. So within the 42 brokers that we have, that is what happens, and therefore that trust is sort of imbued within the body of the business, right? And we get together on Monday, we get together on the last Tuesday of the month, and we engender that trust and help build that trust, even with those who are outside of the original group, as it were, and bring them in, and that's a real bit of value. How do we do that outside of the London broker or outside of the individual broker models that already exist? It's actually quite difficult, because there are lots of different people who we don't know, or we do know, who are dotted around in other places. And what's really interesting about the regulatory framework that we have in the UK is that everything is based on our engagement with the public and with the client. There's absolutely nothing that determines how we engage with each other. In America, it forms a significant part of the regulatory framework of every single state's or the National Association of Realtors terms. And that's something that I intend to bring over here.
Okay.
I think we need to have a set of rules, that govern how we all work with each other.
Yeah.
Because if we can do that, that will, and a regulatory framework just within the profession, right, that will encourage and enable all of us independent brokers, and even the small independent agents, and even the big agents, maybe, who knows, to trust each other, to say, right, if I'm, engaging with you on this property, it is understood that I need to send you an email or a message or whatever to say, this is what I expect, and you will be open to doing that.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. In America, you're not allowed to slag off other brokers. You're not allowed to deliberately target, certainly these are the rules of the NAR anyway, you're not allowed to deliberately target another broker's
Do people stick
listing.
to this?
As far as I understand it, it is a pretty
so
accepted.
cutthroat over there in the States.
But is it cutthroat? I wonder if it's as cutthroat in reality as it is made out for drama.
Well, I mean, I'm only basing this on drama.
I think, why do you need to stick? Why, if you can get a fee regardless from selling another broker's stock, why do you need to pilfer it?
Yeah, I don't know, because you get more of the fee, I guess.
Well, no, you don't.
And you get to say you've sold it.
I don't know. But I think, you're not allowed to slag them off. You're not allowed to try and target their stock. You can generally target, but you can't go, hello, Mr. Jones.
I mean, when I first started an agency, it was unheard of to go and tout somebody else's stock. I mean, and you'd then get a call from the director of that other company saying, how dare you have done this? Whereas now it just seems completely commonplace. You get 5 letters through the door as you're instructed with another agent.
I genuinely love how this is, and it's happened since the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
It's actually really funny because as you say, prior to, probably 5-6 years ago, yes, of course, there were letters that were going out, of course, particularly from the big firms. Right? But now there are websites, and very successful websites, and and sort of tools that we're all given that basically make it really easy for you to send out touting letters to everybody.
Yeah.
So poor vendor. I mean, talk about reputation of estate agents, right? This is terrible.
Yeah.
You go, hello, it's the same envelope, drops through the door on the same day of the week.
Yeah.
5 of them at a time.
Yeah.
Disappointed buyer in your area.
Yeah.
You've been on the market for 12 weeks. All this sort of stuff. And it's all, all is fair in love and war, right? But just have a little bit of respect for yourself.
And also, I think, how pointless in terms of, the costs involved here, right? With doing a touting campaign are huge.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't justify cost art, but also not just the cost, how fucking pointless, right? If you have a buyer for a property that is not your instruction, then there are so many other ways, if you genuinely have a buyer, right, to get that buyer through the door, right? You could speak to the agent, you find out who the owner is, do you have a network, whatever the case is. But sending a letter saying you've been on the market for 12 weeks, we can definitely sell it. It's lies for starters. And also, to what degree does someone pick that letter up and go, but then they do, right? And
but they call you.
Because then they do.
They call, I've just got this. I've just got a wonderful letter.
That's right.
Smithering and Co. Estate agents based in Torquay, who are telling me that they've got a corporate client who's disappointed and would love to buy my house. Okay, I'll call them. There was a stage where I wanted to do provide brokers with a sort of printout bingo where the client can pop it on the fridge, and then every time they get one, and when they get a bingo, they get a bottle of champagne.
That's a great idea.
But this stuff is all about communication. You have to explain that to the vendor now.
Yeah.
So just so on the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th week, and probably some weeks in the middle, you're going to get a whole load of letters, and they're pretty much going to say the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think more and more people are becoming more and more savvy to them. And you just think, come on, guys, just stop wasting paper.
But it really does. It does show how you have to keep innovating, right? Mm-hmm. It shows that once
it worked when they first came out.
They first came out, it worked. But if you don't keep adapting and changing the way that you do this stuff, and everybody, and sorry to say it, but that is a really good example of when everybody achieves the same position, it becomes worthless. Which, dare I say it, comes back to the regulatory bit. That
I definitely see your
argument. If they're all regulated, what's the difference?
I guess I'm just desperate to lift the reputation of estate agents, because when I go to a dinner party,
you are lifting the reputation of estate agents.
You're a broker, Matt. You're
just
broker.
By being here.
You're a co-founder and director. There you go.
My mum write in and ask you to take that.
Yeah. So that's
Rupert, thank you very much.
Thanks.
What we're going to be asking all our guests, and you are our first guest, so definitely we'll be experimenting on a bit here. But we'd like to ask, if you had £1 million to spend in London and £1 million to spend not in London, what would you do with it? Keeping it within the property business, if you could.
When you say £1 million, sorry, just to clarify this question. When you say £1 million to buy a house, are you asking me to buy a house?
What would you do if you had £1 million in London to do with property? What do you think would be? Let's assume you've already got somewhere to live yourself.
To buy a property, or I can invest it in a business.
You could invest it in a business,
or is that
to do with property?
No, you really want me to say where I want to buy?
With property.
That's what you really ask.
I just think
if you had £1 million in London or £1 million outside London, where would you put it?
I think this question is backfiring a bit, but it's good that we've got Rupert here to.
Listen, I think it's God. I mean, £1 million, it's so ridiculous, right? It's such a small amount of money.
I know.
Right.
I remember in 2007 when I saw my first £1 million flat with Douglas and Gordon. In South Kensington, shit, this is really depressing. In 2007, that was depressing. Imagine it now. So it's not South Ken. I think that I would probably look to buy a good family house in one of the outer boroughs with a good transport network to it. As you know, Matt, I used to live in Streatham. 20 minutes into Victoria. those sorts of places, and you can get some.
Can you buy a family house for £1 million?
Yeah, you can. You can. Maybe just in. There are some very grand ones around there, but you can buy good. You can buy good 4-bedroom houses in and around that part of Southwest London, and that's where a lot of friends are and still are. So
we're assuming that you've already got a place to live yourself. Why would you buy a family house?
Because I think that they're good. I think they're good things to own. You say I've got a thing of my own. I don't actually. I mean, I do, but
I'm saying for this scenario. You have your own place to live.
Yeah, I don't think. I mean, if you're asking me, would I do an investment? Would I become a landlord? No.
Right, you wouldn't buy a 1-bedroom in Battersea Power Station.
Absolutely not. No.
Because it would cost 900.
No, but also nobody wants to be a landlord anymore.
No,
it is, as I said earlier, it's a hostile environment. Why would you do it?
Oh no, it's horrendous.
They don't want you. The government don't want private landlords.
Yeah.
So let's stop pretending that they do.
Yeah.
And if this government don't want them, I can tell you the next government are definitely not going to want them.
Which was the very topic on our last podcast.
Anyway,
not go down that.
So that one. So that's that
okay.
one. Then the next one.
Yeah.
Outside of London, does it have to be in England?
Okay, no.
I would go and buy some absolute monster.
Yeah.
In a foreign country, like a chateau in France,
lovely,
or a beautiful chalet in Italy, or a villa in the Tuscan Hills, or something like that.
You can only be there for 180 days in a year.
Yeah, whatever. It doesn't matter. I mean, how long are you holiday? You've got to change the property market in this country, Matthew. You're not allowed to be out of the country for more than 100.
Matt you're so sour about Brexit, and also so sour about holding a British passport for the purposes of being able to live outside of the UK, right?
Yeah,
that is a big issue of contention.
Yeah, so I would buy something really lovely abroad, and maybe it wouldn't be in Europe, but maybe it would be somewhere
very sensible.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one more question: have you ever kissed an estate agent, and if so, where was it, and what were the circumstances?
I was married to an estate agent at one point.
Okay.
Yes, there was kissing involved.
Multiple times.
And what was the other part of that question?
Well, what were the circumstances? But if you were married, I think that sums that one up.
I think I might have kissed more than one estate agent in my life, including you two.
That is true. And very good way to end this podcast, right?
Rupert, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. And for the listeners as well, this is actually being recorded by video. So for those that want to see this video along the podcast itself, head over to YouTube, and the handle is @Smith and Ericsson. Until next time.
Very good.
Thanks very much.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. We hope you found our discussion with Rupert Collingwood insightful and thought-provoking, and that you've gained some valuable new perspectives on the world of property. Remember, if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, or if there are any topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Proper Teasers.